Hi, welcome back guys, this is your friend, WTFW with another fiction. What if Deku have second chance to prove himself as a hero now? Before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The shrill ring of my phone cut through the bustling street noise. I fished it out of my pocket, glancing at the caller ID. Izumi. My sister never called during club hours unless it was important. Izuku. There's a gate opening near Shibuya Station. Izumi's voice crackled with excitement. It's all over the news. They're saying it might be B rank. A B rank date in the middle of Tokyo. That was rare. Dangerous, yes, but also a chance to see top-tier hunters in action. Thanks for the heads up, I said, already changing direction. Stay safe, okay? You too, big brother. Don't do anything stupid. I hung up, pocketing the phone as I broke into a jog. The crowd around me thinned as I neared Shibuya Station, then swelled again as I hit the gathering throng of onlookers. Police barricades held back the masses, but people pushed and shoved for a better view. I elbowed my way through, muttering apologies. A gap opened up, and I slipped through to the front. The scene before me was chaos. The gate hovered about 20 feet off the ground, a swirling vortex of blues and purples. It was bigger than I expected, maybe 40 feet across. Energy crackled around its edges, sending shivers down my spine. Even from this distance, I could feel its pull. My eyes darted around, taking in details. Crushed cars littered the street. A nearby building had a massive hole punched through its side. And there, in the center of it all, stood a hunter. Look, it's Kamui Woods, someone in the crowd shouted. Sure enough, the wooden hero had just arrived, his branches stretching out to form a protective barrier between the gate and the civilians. I fumbled for my notebook, scribbling furiously. E-rank heroes like me were a dime a dozen these days. Ever since the gates started appearing, more and more people had awakened to some level of power. Most of us could barely lift a car or shoot a weak energy blast. Useful for crowd control or minor rescue operations, but not much else. Me. I couldn't even do that. No matter how many times I'd tested, no matter how much I'd trained, I remained stubbornly quirkless. An E rank in name only, with nothing but my wits and my drive to contribute. But that didn't stop me from studying every hero fight I could. I lived for moments like this, chances to see the pros in action. To learn from them, to understand the intricacies of their powers and strategies. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to make a difference. A roar split the air. Something massive burst from the gate, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a shark. Its skin glistened, covered in razor-sharp scales. It lashed out with a clawed hand, sending a car flying. Kamui, left flank, the A-rank hunter shouted. Kamui Woods responded instantly, branches lashing out to catch the airborne vehicle. He set it down gently, then extended his reach to create a net, trapping the shark creature's arm. My pen flew across the page. Kamui's reaction time, 0.3 seconds. Tensile strength of branches, enough to halt a 2-ton projectile. The gate pulsed, energy crackling outward. It was easily 40 feet across, far larger than the C-rank portals I'd seen before. The air around it shimmered, distorting light and sound. It's expanding, someone screamed. Before panic could set in, a new voice boomed across the square. Don't worry, citizens. The cavalry has arrived. Mount Lady appeared, growing to her full height in seconds. Her gigantification quirk never failed to impress. She towered over the buildings, her costume stretched tight across her enormous form. With a single step, she closed the distance to the shark villain. Her fist came down like a meteor, slamming into its scaled hide. The creature howled, driven to its knees by the impact. I jotted down notes frantically. Mount Lady's growth rate, approximately 10 feet per second. Force of impact, My hand froze mid-sentence. The clock tower behind Mount Lady caught my eye, and reality came crashing back. Shit. I was late. The D-rank gate wasn't going to clear itself. I shoved my notebook into my backpack and took off running, weaving through the crowd. The excitement of watching pro heroes faded, replaced by a gnawing anxiety. I couldn't afford to lose this job. Not when Izumi and I were barely scraping by as it was. 10 minutes later, I ducked into an alley near the construction site, panting. I pulled out my hero outfit from my bag, a faded All Might hoodie and cargo pants that had seen better days. The hoodie was a size too small, stretching tight across my chest. The pants hung loose, cinched with a fraying belt. I hesitated, eyeing my school uniform. It was newer, better fitted. But the thought of paying for a replacement sobered me up. Sighing, I tugged on the hoodie and pants. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, confirming the location. The construction site loomed ahead, ringed by temporary fencing. My beginner's badge hung heavy around my neck, a constant reminder of my status. Not quite a pro, but licensed for low-level gates and cleanup work. As I approached, a familiar voice called out, "Midoriya, you made it." Shiro waved enthusiastically, his round face split by a grin. The other heroes turned, nodding and smiling as I walked up. I gave a simple nod. Hey, no need for small talk. I had a job to do. As I passed the group, heading towards the gate, I caught snippets of their conversation. With Midoriya here, this'll be a breeze, Chinen said confidently. Really? Shoichi's voice was skeptical. Is he really that strong? Chinen laughed. Oh man, you don't know? That's humanity's weakest weapon. Huh. It's like, you know how Stars and Stripes is called America's nuclear deterrent? Well, Midoriya's the opposite. They say he's so weak, even E-rank gates are a challenge. No way. Then why's everyone so happy he's here? Are you kidding? It means this mission's gonna be a cakewalk. If they sent Midoriya, it can't be anything serious. Sano's relief was palpable. Oh, thank God. I was worried when they said it was D-rank. I kept walking, my enhanced hearing picking up every word. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Damn old geezers. Midoriya-kun. I turned, surprised to see Momo Yayurazu standing nearby. Miss Yayurazu, I nodded. Didn't expect to see you here. I glanced up as Yayurazu approached, taking in her athletic figure and dark, intelligent eyes. Out of habit, my gaze flicked downwards before I could stop it. I mentally kicked myself. Staring was unacceptable, no matter how stunning she was. Yayurazu's gaze softened with concern as she took in my appearance. What happened this time? I sighed, running a hand through my messy hair. No point hiding it from her. Just a little mishap during some hero work. Nothing major. She raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying it. Yayurazu had a knack for seeing through excuses. I relented under her stare. Okay, I may have taken a bad hit fighting a villain yesterday, but really, I'm fine now. I gestured to emphasize my wholeness, as if my hoodie and worn jeans didn't make my lack of injuries obvious already. Yayurazu pursed her lips, unsatisfied. She glanced around, spotting a nearby stack of rebar. Let's sit for a moment before the others arrive, she suggested, lowering herself gracefully onto the makeshift seat. After a pause, I joined her. Once settled, she turned to me, concern still lingering in her eyes. Which hospital did you go to? What did they say? I cringed internally. Of course, she would want details. Just the local clinic, I hedged. And it was just some bruising, nothing serious. The doctor said I was fine. Technically true, though I left out the part about cracked ribs and a mild concussion. But going into specifics would only worry her more. Yayurazu frowned, processing this new information. I could almost see the gears turning in her mind. How badly were you hurt in an E-rank mission? She finally asked. Did something go wrong? I stared down at my scuffed sneakers. I might have gotten tossed into a building by the villain, I admitted. Just me, though. The rest of the team was fine, I added hastily. Yaoyorozu's eyes widened in alarm. That's terrible. Why were you the only one injured? Well, the others had more combat-oriented quirks, I explained. One makes barriers, another shoots glue. Me, I'm more of a support role. It sounded better than saying I had no real quirk at all. But Yaoyorozu's probing gaze told me she saw right through my flimsy excuse. Midoriya, she began gently. Why do you want to be a hero when it's so dangerous for you? I froze at the question, one I constantly asked myself. Flashes of memory surfaced, the scornful looks when I said I'd apply to UA, the muttered insults when I barely passed the licensing exam. The word quirkless echoed in my mind, full of derision. Yaoyorozu watched me closely, patiently waiting as I gathered my thoughts. I guess. Because helping people makes me feel worthy, I finally responded. Like I have a purpose. I raised my eyes to meet hers. My quirk may be weak, but that doesn't mean I'm useless. I can still analyze situations, come up with plans. As long as I'm contributing something meaningful, I'll keep trying to be a hero, even if it's hard sometimes. 2. I let out a shaky breath, surprised at my own vehemence. But it was the truth. The whole reason I endured the bruises and taunts and long hours studying combat. Well, that and hero work making it easier to provide for my sister and mother. Yaoyorozu was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, she laid a hand on my shoulder. That's very noble of you, she said softly. Just promise me you'll be more careful from now on. We still have UA exams ahead of us. I smiled, warmed by her understanding. I promised. And thanks, Yaoyorozu, for listening and not judging me. She returned my smile. Of course, that's what friends are for. In that moment, I was incredibly grateful to have someone like her in my corner. Someone who saw me as more than just quirkless Deku. Hey, lovebirds, a voice called out, shattering the moment. Time to get to work. Yaoyorozu and I jerked apart, twin blushes staining our cheeks. Sano and the other heroes were waving us over, ready to begin the mission. I stood quickly, embarrassment forgotten as excitement flooded in. A chance to see Yaoyorozu's powerful creation quirk in action. To provide for my family. This is what I lived for. What I endured the bruises and taunts for. A reason to keep moving forward. I strode towards the shimmering gate, Yaoyorozu falling smoothly into step beside me. Together, we joined the rest of the team. 8 months ago. I stared blankly at the career aspiration form on my desk as our teacher droned on about our futures after graduation in 2 months. The options seemed endless: salaryman, office worker, entrepreneur, but my classmates only had eyes for one: hero. Ever since we were kids, being a pro-hero was all anyone could talk about. The power, the fame, the chance to fight villains and protect the innocent. For me, though, it was more than that. Being a hero meant finally feeling like I belonged, like I mattered. The chatter rose as our teacher mentioned UA, the top hero academy in the country. Attending was my dream, but I knew the odds were stacked against me. Without a strong quirk, I'd be lucky to even get past the entrance exams. Still, I had to try. For my mom's sake. For my own. Hey teach, don't waste your time on these losers, Kaken sneered from the back of the class, tiny explosions crackling from his palms. We all know I'm the only one from this crap school who'll make it into UA. I gritted my teeth as the class erupted into murmurs. Kaken had always been gifted, breezing through school on raw talent alone. But his arrogance was infuriating. He acted like attending UA was a foregone conclusion, not the culmination of years of blood, sweat, and tears. You got something to say, Deku? Kaken growled, stalking towards me. I shrank down in my seat, avoiding his piercing red gaze. That childhood nickname, once a term of friendship, now dripped with contempt. Worthless. Useless. Quirkless. No, Kaken, I stammered, heat rising in my cheeks. Our classmates snickered under their breath. That's what I thought, Kaken sneered. A useless pebble like you could never be a hero. Before I could react, his palm exploded against the side of my head, knocking me to the floor. Pain bloomed, hot and bright. The class roared with laughter. That's enough, Bakugo, our teacher said half-heartedly. Let's get back to the lesson. Humiliation flooded through me as I picked myself off the ground. Kaken swaggered back to his desk, a self-satisfied grin on his face. Nothing would change. I was still just quirkless Deku to him. A punchline. The memory of that day lingered as Yaoyorozu, and I approached the shimmering gate entrance. Kaken's scornful words echoed in my mind, mixing with the hushed insults of pro-heroes at the construction site. Worthless. Useless. Just give up. My steps faltered. What was I even doing here? I should just… Izuku? Yaoyorozu's gentle voice cut through the spiral of dark thoughts. Her hand came to rest on my shoulder, warm and reassuring. Are you all right? We can take a moment if you need it. I shook my head sharply, dredging up a weak smile. I'm fine. Just psyching myself up. It was a lie, and we both knew it. But the concern in her eyes reminded me why I endured this. For her. For my mom and sister relying on my paycheck. I couldn't give in to despair. Drawing in a shaky breath, I straightened my shoulders and turned to face the shimmering portal. Yaoyorozu gave my arm one last comforting squeeze before letting her hand fall away. Just then, a brash voice called out from up ahead. Listen up, newbies. I want no screw-ups on this mission. Stick to your roles and we'll all get paid. It was Sano, the designated raid leader. A notoriously harsh taskmaster. At his words, the mood shifted palpably. Anxious excitement replaced casual camaraderie. This was really happening. You ready? I asked Yaoyorozu with forced enthusiasm. She shot me a small, understanding smile. As ready as I'll ever be. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to the sudden darkness that enveloped us. 1 second I was standing outside the shimmering portal with Yaoyorozu and the rest of the raid team, squinting against the afternoon sun. The next, we were here. Wherever here was. It was some kind of cave, the air cool and heavy with a smell of damp earth. I could hear the soft drip of water in the distance, echoing strangely against stone walls I couldn't yet see. Disoriented, I stumbled slightly before catching my balance. Around me, the rest of the group were similarly shaken, their forms vague shadows in the pitch blackness. I could hear muttered curses and the rustle of clothing as they got their bearings. My heart pounded, senses straining for any sign of danger while my mind reeled. Everyone stay calm and form a perimeter, came Sano's gravelly voice out of the darkness. I felt a hand brush my shoulder, Yaoyorozu guiding me into position next to her. A pale light began glowing to my left, and I turned to see Yaoyorozu creating a lantern with her quirk. The warm glow illuminated her face, brows drawn in concentration as more lanterns took shape around us. Soon, the cavern was awash in a flickering golden light. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. Get it together, Izuku. You knew missions could be dangerous. Focus on the task at hand. I thought back to sitting in our cramped apartment a few months ago, watching Izumi work on homework. The unpaid bills piled on the kitchen counter. I'm joining a gate exploration team, I'd told her. The money's good if you advance ranks. Izumi's eyes had widened in alarm. But isn't that really risky? She'd asked. I smiled and ruffled her hair. Don't worry about your big brother. I'm the strongest. careful. Somewhere in this winding cave system, monsters were likely lurking. But I'd chosen this path to provide for my family. No threats detected nearby, Sano reported, peering into the shadowy tunnels branching off the cavern. Let's get moving before that changes. I gripped my knife tightly as we began advancing. The craggy walls glistened with moisture, our footsteps echoing eerily against the stone. Glowing crystals jutting from cracks provided additional light. This place was ancient, primal. The fine hairs on my neck prickled. My analytical mind went into overdrive, likely goblin cave based on the crude drawings and gnawed bones littering the area. The cramped tunnels suggested a labyrinthian layout. I marked possible escape routes should things go sideways. Up ahead, the other team members spoke in hushed voices. Didn't sign up for spelunking through some freaky cave. Seriously, the JHSC should have given us more intel. Their unease was palpable. I couldn't blame them, this dungeon was an unknown. But their doubtful glances my way stung. Did they really have so little faith in me already? The sudden skittering of claws on stone was my only warning before chaos erupted all around us. Goblins, at least 24 of them, poured from hidden crevices, beady eyes glinting with predatory glee in the lantern light. Cries of alarm went up from the other heroes as we were swarmed from all sides. The cramped tunnel left little room to maneuver or utilize quirks. I froze for a critical second, paralyzed by indecision should I fight or flee. A goblin lunged at me, jagged teeth bared. I yelped and ducked just in time, the creature sailing over me. All around, the other heroes responded with practiced coordination. Sano's katana sliced any goblin within reach. Kaido manipulated water from a nearby underground stream, using it to bash opponents against the cave walls. Despite being outnumbered, their superior training and teamwork carried the day. Within minutes, they had dispatched or driven back the majority of the goblins. The reprieve was short-lived. A guttural snarl warned me of danger seconds before a lone straggler bowled into me, knocking me to the hard ground. My head cracked against stone and stars burst across my vision. Dazed, I peered up at my assailant. He was a small, wiry thing, barely up to my waist. Matted fur covered his emaciated frame. The goblin wore only a crude loincloth, but his claws and jagged teeth were weapon enough. Beady red eyes glinted with feral hunger as he crouched over me. My heart stuttered in my chest. I was alone, disoriented, my cheap hunting knife my only defense against this monster. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. I was going to die here, bleeding out alone in this light-forsaken cave. The goblin lunged with a shrill cry, aiming for my exposed throat. Pure instinct had me rolling aside just in time, his claws raking along my shoulder instead of tearing out my jugular. Searing pain lanced through me, but I barely registered it, adrenaline flooding my veins. Gasping, I scrambled to my feet. The goblin pursued me relentlessly, herding me into a side tunnel away from the others. I retreated frantically, knife clutched in one white-knuckled hand. But the creature was faster, driving me back against the tunnel wall. He swiped at me again and again, maneuvering me into the optimal position for the kill. It was only my smaller size allowing me to duck and dodge his strikes, but I knew my luck was running out. I had to do something. Fight back, somehow. But how? The goblin pressed his advantage, thinking me cornered. In that moment, some primal part of my brain clicked into gear, finally overriding the panicked haze. I stopped trying to get away and focused on my opponent. The patterns underlying his attack became clear. He always struck left to right, paused briefly before pouncing again. As the next blow came, I was ready. I dropped low and to the right, letting his claws whistle over my head. Before he could recover, I surged upward and buried my knife in his chest with all my strength. Hot, fetid blood gushed over my hand. The goblin gurgled, the fire in his eyes fading as he sagged. With a final wheeze, he collapsed, my blade still buried to the hilt in his chest. I sank to my knees, exhaustion crashing over me. The tunnel swam before my eyes. Each breath was an effort, my shoulder radiating white-hot agony. But I was alive. By some miracle, I'd survived. I winced as Yaoyorozu gently cleaned the gashes on my shoulder, her hands deftly swabbing away the crusted blood. Even her light touch sent spikes of pain radiating through me. "Sorry," she murmured, brow furrowing in concentration. "I know it hurts, but we have to get these wounds properly disinfected." I nodded, biting my lip to keep from crying out. The dim lantern light cast flickering shadows across the cavern walls, reminiscent of my near-fatal encounter just minutes earlier. If it hadn't been for Yaoyorozu's quick actions, I'd likely have bled out before making it back to the surface. After applying a pungent but effective salve to the gashes, she placed her palm flat against the cave floor. Sparks danced across her skin as she activated her quirk creation. Before my eyes, medical supplies began materializing: gauze, bandages, a vial of red potion. "This should help with the pain and speed up healing," she explained, holding up the potion for my inspection. I took it with a murmured thanks, downing the tart, herbal concoction in one go. Almost immediately, a soothing warmth bloomed under my skin, dulling the throbbing ache. Yaoyorozu's quirk never failed to amaze me. With just a touch, she could create complex objects from her own body's energy stores. It was incredibly versatile for support and rescue work. Watching her utilize it so adeptly was a privilege. As she wrapped the bandages around my shoulder with practiced care, I felt a pang of guilt. She should be focusing her efforts on the other, more experienced team members, not wasting supplies on the useless newbie who'd gotten in over his head. "Yaoyorozu, you really don't have to," I began awkwardly. She paused, meeting my eyes with a gentle but stern look. "Nonsense, Midoriya. You fought bravely today. Let me do this for you." I ducked my head, cheeks warming at the praise. It was more than I deserved. If anything, my rash actions had jeopardized the mission. But Yaoyorozu's tone brooked no argument. We passed the next few minutes in silence as she finished tending to me, the only sounds the occasional drip of water and murmur of voices from deeper in the cave system. I studied her face while she worked, struck not for the first time by how someone like her had ended up in this profession. With her refined features and obvious highborn background, she could have easily pursued any elite career she wished. Yet here she was, wrapping bandages around some no-name hunter in a dank goblin cave. I wondered what path had led her to risking her life daily in the gates. "There, all set," she pronounced at last, leaning back on her heels to survey her handiwork. I flexed my shoulder gingerly. The pain had faded to a dull throb. "Wow, that potion works fast. I can barely feel it now." "I'm glad to hear it." She began tidying up the remaining medical supplies. "You really should be more careful, Midoriya. That goblin nearly killed you." "Why, yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I just panicked and reacted without thinking." She sighed, though not unkindly. "You have good instincts, but you must temper that with caution and preparation. Rushing headlong into danger will only get you killed." I nodded, but before I could respond, the heavy trot of boots interrupted us. Sano appeared around the corner, scowling. "There you are. Debrief in 5. Let's get this over with." He turned on his heel, not waiting for a reply. I clambered hastily to my feet, wincing as the motion pulled at my wounds. Yaoyorozu steadied me with a hand on my good arm. "Careful now, and remember what I said: caution over recklessness." Her eyes were serious, but full of warmth. I met her gaze and managed a lopsided grin. "I'll try my best." She smiled back, giving my arm a light squeeze before gathering the supplies and heading deeper into the cave. I watched her go, a jumble of emotions swirling within me: gratitude, admiration, and something deeper I didn't dare name. A few minutes later, I stood before the massive doors, my heart pounding in my chest. The ancient stone was covered in intricate carvings, swirling patterns and symbols I couldn't begin to decipher. Just looking at them made my head swim. There was a heaviness in the air, like the weight of centuries pressing down on us. "Hey everyone!" Sano Utachi's gruff voice cut through the tense silence. Our raid leader stood before us, his jet-black katana resting casually on one shoulder. Despite his wrinkled face, he radiated the confidence of a seasoned warrior. "Listen up for a moment." We gathered around, exchanging nervous glances. I wiped my sweaty palms on my pants, trying to calm my nerves. "Since the gate hasn't closed yet, it looks like the boss is behind these doors," Kaido continued, his eyes scanning our group. "Since none of us are employed by any hero agencies, it's up to us if we want to take this thing on." A few people shifted uneasily. I couldn't blame them. We'd already faced more danger than most of us had bargained for. Sano nodded solemnly. "It's going to be dangerous, so we could always just wait for the more skilled heroes to come in and kill this thing. On the other hand, our profit margin will go way down." My stomach clenched at the mention of money. The whole reason I was here. "So, I have a proposal," Sano said. "The 17 of us will take a vote. And no matter what the result, no complaining when we're done. Fair?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. I chewed my lip, my mind racing. "All right, let's hear it," Sano said. "Who wants to face the boss?" Voices rose up around me, a cacophony of fear and bravado. "Are you crazy? We barely survived the goblins. Think of the payday if we pull this off. I didn't sign up for a suicide mission. We've come this far, might as well see it through." I stayed silent, torn. The smart move would be to back out now. We were in over our heads, and I'd already had one brush with death today. But then I thought of my mom, lying in that hospital bed. Of the mounting medical bills that threatened to drown us. The voting began. I watched as hands went up, counting silently. 8 for, 8 against. Momo voted against. All eyes turned to me. The deciding vote. I closed my eyes, remembering my mother's pale face, her brave smile as she told me not to worry. How many times had I promised her I'd find a way to make things better? I vote we go on," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. A mix of groans and excited chatter broke out. Sono raised his hand for silence. "It's decided then. We face the boss." He fixed us with a stern look. "Now's the time for final preparations. Check your gear, cast your buffs. We go in smart, or we don't go in at all." The group dispersed, a flurry of activity as people double-checked weapons and armor. I stood there, frozen, the weight of my decision crushing me. A gentle hand on my arm snapped me out of it. I turned to see Yayurazu, her dark eyes focused on me. "Are you sure about this, Midoriya?" she asked softly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. She studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "All right. But promise me you'll be careful in there. No more reckless stunts." "I promise," I managed to croak out. A small smile tugged at her lips. "Good. And when this is all over, if you still feel like you need to apologize, you can take me out to dinner." My eyes widened, heat rushing to my face. Before I could stammer out a response, she was gone, moving to help the others prepare. I stood there, my mind reeling. Had she really just? No, focused. Boss fight now, potential dinner plans later. I took a deep breath as I stepped through the massive stone doors, the cool, damp air of the inner chamber washing over me. Rows of statues lined the walls, their stone features so lifelike I had to resist the urge to shiver. It was like being watched by 100 sightless sentinels. Up ahead, an enormous statue of what I assumed was the temple's deity towered above us, seated on an ornate throne. Its face was fixed in a stern, judging expression that turned my blood to ice. This was clearly a sacred place that we had no business trespassing in. Fan out and check for traps, Sano ordered, his voice low. But stick close, I don't want anyone getting picked off. We moved cautiously, senses straining for the slightest hint of danger. A tense silence hung over us, broken only by the echo of our footsteps on the ancient stone floor. I ran my fingers along the walls as I walked, feeling for any hidden switches or triggers. So far, so good. But the deeper we went into that still, oppressive chamber, the more the unease gnawed at me. Something felt wrong, off, like invisible eyes tracking our every move from the shadows. I noticed Yaoyorozu scanning a section of the far wall, brow furrowed in concentration. As I drew closer, I saw an intricate series of runes carved into the stone. Can you read it? I asked. She nodded. I think so. It's an ancient dialect, but... Her fingers traced the symbols as she translated out loud. Carthanan Temple's commandments. First, worship the Lord. Second, praise the Lord. Third, prove your faith. She paused, frowning. That's all there is. I shuddered as an icy chill traced down my spine. Spinning around, I was certain I saw one of the larger statue's eyes move. I stepped closer, squinting hard at the stone behemoth. Had it just been my imagination? What do you think it means? Sano asked gruffly, joining us by the inscription. It's clearly some kind of warning, Yaoyorozu replied. We must be in the central temple. Perhaps this lord they mention is. She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. The temple deity. The boss we had come here to face. Sudden debate broke out among the group about whether we should turn back. I tuned it out, focusing on those statues, a growing sense of dread welling up inside me. We were in terrible danger here, I could feel it. This place wasn't going to let us leave without a fight. Before I could voice my concerns, a deafening boom reverberated through the chamber. I whirled to see the massive stone doors slam close behind us with an awful finality. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The weight of our situation crashed down on us like a tidal wave. That's it. I'm done with this shit. The shout came from Hiro, a muscle-bound hero with more brawn than brains. He threw his hands up in frustration, his face twisted in anger and fear. It was a mistake to even come here, enjoy the boss's treasure. Before anyone could stop him, Hiro stormed towards the door, reaching for the ring handles. No. Sano's voice was barely audible at first, then rose to a desperate shout. Don't touch it. But it was too late. The sound of stone grinding against stone filled the air. I blinked, and in that split second, everything changed. Where Hiro had stood, there was now only a statue, its stone mace extended and dripping with blood. My stomach lurched as the reality of what just happened sank in. It moves. Yaoyorozu's voice was barely a whisper, her usual confidence shattered. My mind raced, piecing together the horrifying puzzle. If that statue could move, then. I whipped my head around to face the massive deity statue. Its eyes, once lifeless stone, now glowed a searing orange, and they were fixed directly on me. Oh, God. I've stared death in the face more times than I care to count. The slash down my back that nearly bled me dry. The weak trapped in a dungeon, gnawing on leather straps to keep the hunger at bay. Each time, I walked away changed, harder, sharper. It's funny how your mind works when you're sure you're about to die. Everything slows down. Details pop out in vivid color. And sometimes, just sometimes, you see things coming before they happen. That's how I spotted the statue's eyes flaring to life. 1 second they were dull stone, the next molten orange, fixed right on me. My body moved before my brain could catch up. Get down, I yelled, tackling Yaoyorozu to the ground. My arms wrapped around her protectively, as we hit the floor hard. A searing light filled the chamber, so bright it burned even through my closed eyelids. The air crackled with energy, making my hair stand on end. Then came the sound, a horrific, ear-splitting shriek of stone tearing through stone. The beam passed over us, so close I felt the heat singe the back of my neck. For a moment, all I could hear was the thunderous roar and my own pounding heartbeat. Then, silence. I opened my eyes, blinking away the afterimages. The acrid stench of ozone and something far worse filled my nostrils. Slowly, I raised my head to survey the damage. Where our teammates had stood moments before, there was only a blackened streak across the floor. At the far end of the chamber, a massive hole had been carved through the solid rock wall. My stomach lurched as the reality sank in. Those charred lumps, they'd been people, heroes, alive and breathing just seconds ago. A choked sob from beneath me snapped me back to the present. Yayurazu. I'd practically crushed her in my desperate dive. "Are you okay?" I asked, scrambling off her. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." The words died in my throat as I got a good look at her. Yayurazu's face was streaked with tears, her eyes wide with terror. Her hands were clamped over her ears, so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Yayurazu," I reached out, hesitating before gently touching her shoulder. She flinched violently at the contact. "They're gone," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're all gone." I swallowed hard, fighting back the panic clawing at my own chest. We couldn't afford to fall apart now. Not with that thing still looming over us. "We need to move," I said, as calmly as I could manage. "Can you stand?" Yayurazu didn't respond. Her eyes were unfocused, staring at nothing. The trembling in her limbs had gotten worse. "Yayurazu," I tried again, more urgently this time. "Momo, please, we have to go." I watched as Sano dragged himself across the floor, leaving a trail of blood behind him. His left arm was gone, severed just below the elbow. The jagged end of bone stuck out from the mangled flesh, and blood pulsed steadily from the wound. "Midoriya," he gasped. "Thank you for the warning." I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to vomit. "Don't talk," I said, quickly assessing the injury. "We need to stop the bleeding." My mind raced through the basic first aid training I'd received. Elevate the limb, apply pressure. But with what? I glanced around frantically, then stripped off my hoodie. "This is gonna hurt," I warned Sano, wrapping the fabric tightly around the stump. He gritted his teeth, but didn't cry out. "Yayurazu," I called over my shoulder. "Can you create a tourniquet?" No response. I looked back to see her still frozen in shock, staring blankly at the carnage around us. "Damn it," I muttered, tightening the makeshift bandage as best I could. Sano coughed weakly. "Kid, this dungeon, it's not right." "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep him talking, keep him conscious. "I've cleared B ranks before." "Hell, even a few A ranks," he wheezed. This is something else. This rank at least, maybe higher." My blood ran cold. If Sano was right, we were way out of our depth. I glanced around the chamber, taking stock of our situation. One of the healers were charred remains. The other rocked back and forth, mumbling incoherently. "Yayurazu," I tried again, reaching out to touch her arm. She flinched violently. "Momo, please, we need your help." Her eyes finally focused on me, brimming with tears. I can't," she whispered. "My quirk. I can't think straight." Before I could respond, movement caught my eye. Tanaka, the runner we'd hired to ferry messages, was slowly getting to his feet. "What are you doing?" I hissed. "Get down." He shook his head, a wild look in his eyes. "I can't die here," he said. "I've got a contract starting next week. Big guild, big money." This was supposed to be my last job as a freelancer. You'll die if you stand up, I pleaded. That thing will? But Tanaka wasn't listening. He took a deep breath, muscles tensing. No, I shouted, but it was too late. Tanaka bolted for the hole in the wall. For a split second, I dared to hope he might make it. Then the statue's eyes flared orange once more. The beam lanced out, faster than I could blink. It caught Tanaka mid-stride, tearing through his body like tissue paper. What was left? I squeezed my eyes shut, but the image was already seared into my brain. Yaoyorozu let out a choked sob beside me, her fingers digging painfully into my arm. The acrid smell of burnt flesh filled the air, mixing with the metallic tang of blood. My mind kicked into overdrive, drowning out the chaos around me. I forced myself to breathe, to focus on what I could see and hear. There had to be a pattern, some logic to this madness. I replayed the attacks in my head, piecing together the puzzle. The statue only struck when someone moved suddenly or tried to escape. It hadn't attacked us while we were on the ground or talking quietly. Was it reacting to perceived threats? My eyes darted to the inscription Yaoyorozu had translated earlier. Faith and worship. I muttered, pieces clicking into place. The commandments, the statues, the deity figure, it all pointed to some twisted form of religious reverence. A theory formed in my mind, wild and desperate. But to test it, I'd have to do something incredibly stupid. I glanced at Yaoyorozu, still trembling beside me, then at Sano's pale face. They needed me to figure this out. I couldn't let them down. Taking a deep breath, I slowly pushed myself to my feet. Midoriya, what are you doing? Sano hissed, reaching for my leg. Get down. I shook my head, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Trust me, I whispered, not sure if I even trusted myself. As I straightened up, the statue's eyes blazed to life. Orange light flooded the chamber. This was it. I was either about to solve the puzzle or die trying. I threw myself to the ground, squeezing my eyes shut. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the light faded, and I let out a shaky breath. It worked, I gasped, relief and triumph washing over me. It actually worked. What the hell just happened? Kaido demanded, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. I sat up, mind racing as I pieced it all together. It's the commandments, I explained, gesturing to the inscription. This place, it's some kind of twisted temple. The statue only attacks when we violate the rules of worship. That's insane, one of the survivors muttered. Is it? I countered. Think about it. It only attacked when we tried to leave or stood up suddenly. But when I got down, showing submission, I could see the realization dawning on their faces. Yaoyorozu's eyes widened, a spark of hope replacing the fear. So what? We just have to play along with this sick game? Kaido growled. I nodded. For now, at least. Until we can figure out a way out of here. One by one, the survivors began to bow, their movements hesitant and awkward. I held my breath, watching the statue's eyes. As the last person lowered themselves to the ground, the orange glow dimmed and faded. I felt the tension in my muscles ease as the statue's eyes dimmed. Around me, the others let out shaky breath. For a moment, we just sat there in stunned silence, hardly daring to believe we were still alive. Holy shit, Kaido muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. That was too close. Yaoyorozu's grip on my arm loosened slightly, but she didn't let go completely. I could feel her trembling against me. Is it over? Someone whispered. I wanted to say yes. To tell them we'd figured it out, that we were safe now. But something in my gut told me this was far from finished. Don't let your guard down, I said, keeping my voice low. We still need to find a way out of here. Sano grunted in agreement, his face pale from blood loss. Kid's right. We're not out of the woods yet. As the initial shock wore off, people started talking in hushed tones. Some were already making plans to leave, while others argued about what to do next. I tuned them out, focusing on the statue looming above us. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. A trick of the shadows, maybe. But as I watched, I saw the statue's lips begin to part. It was slow, almost imperceptible. The grinding of stone against stone sent chills down my spine. Guys, I said, my mouth suddenly dry. Look at the statue. Heads turned, and a collective gasp rippled through the group. The statue's mouth had opened into a wide, terrifying grin. Its teeth gleamed in the dim light, unnaturally sharp. 1 inch. What the hell? Kaido breathed. Is it? Smiling at us? Yaoyorozu's grip on my arm tightened again. This isn't right, she whispered. Statues don't just change like that. Maybe it's over, one of the newer heroes said hopefully. Maybe this means we passed the test or something. But I knew better. The knot in my stomach tightened as I stared up at that monstrous grin. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. My mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. The commandments, the statue's behavior, the sudden change, it all had to mean something. But what? Before I could voice my thoughts, a deafening crack split the air. The ground beneath us shuddered, and I instinctively threw an arm around Yaoyorozu to steady her. The statue was moving. Its massive stone foot lifted off the ground, sending tremors through the chamber. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling as it took its first thunderous step. Oh God, someone whimpered. We're all going to die. But I barely heard them. My eyes were fixed on the inscription Yaoyorozu had translated earlier. The remaining commandments. There was something there, just out of reach. Then it hit me. The horrible realization of what might be required of us. What this test really entailed. As the statue's foot came crashing down, shaking the very foundations of the chamber, one thought burned through my mind. This is far from over. My heart pounded in my chest as the statue took another thunderous step. We'd figured out part of the puzzle. The statue only attacked when we violated the rules of worship. But what did "praise the Lord" actually mean? I glanced around at the others. Some were frozen in terror, while others scrambled backwards, trying to put distance between themselves and the advancing colossus. A few were outright screaming. Everyone, stay calm, I shouted. But my voice was drowned out by the chaos. That's when I noticed him, an older man with graying hair and a worn Bible clutched to his chest. His eyes gleamed with a fervent light as he stepped forward, arms outstretched. Wait, I yelled, a sudden dread gripping me. Don't. But he couldn't hear me over the rumbling of the statue's footsteps. The man dropped to his knees, his lips moving in fervent prayer. For a moment, I dared to hope it might work. Then I saw the statue's foot rising, casting a shadow over the praying man. Move, I screamed, lunging forward. Too late. The massive stone foot came down with a sickening force. I turned away, but couldn't block out the awful sound. When I looked back, there was nothing left but a red smear on the stone floor. Bile rose in my throat. I'd seen death before, but never like this. Never so pointless. The screaming reached a fever pitch. People were losing it, any semblance of order crumbling away. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to think. There had to be a solution, a way out of this nightmare. But all I could see was that poor man's face, moments before. No, I couldn't let his death be for nothing. I had to figure this out, had to save the others. Even if I was the weakest one here, I could still use my mind. I opened my eyes, forcing myself to look at the statue. Its grin seemed to mock us, daring us to make the next move. Okay, I muttered to myself. Think, Izuku. What are we missing? My eyes darted around the room. taking in every detail. The massive deity statue loomed over us all, but it wasn't alone. Scattered throughout the chamber were dozens of smaller statues, each frozen in a different pose. As I studied them, patterns began to emerge. There were two distinct types: warriors and musicians. The warriors clutched various weapons, swords, spears, axes. But the others, they held instruments: drums, flutes, harps, and more I couldn't even name. Wait, the instruments. They weren't just decorations, they were the key. My whole body tensed as the pieces fell into place. We weren't supposed to just stand still or bow. We had to play the music, to literally praise the Lord with song. For a split second, doubt crept in. What if I was wrong? If I told everyone to run for the instruments and I'd misunderstood, I'd be sending them to their deaths. But as another scream echoed through the chamber, I knew I had to act. We were dead anyway if we did nothing. Listen, I shouted. The instruments. We have to go to the statues with instruments. I grabbed Yaoyorozu's arm, yanking her to her feet. Come on. We sprinted across the chamber, dodging the swinging weapons of the warrior statues. All around us was chaos. Some of our group ran in the wrong direction. Others stood paralyzed with fear. The grinding of stone on stone filled the air as the deity statue took another thunderous step. We reached the drum statue first. As soon as Yaoyorozu's hands touched it, the drumsticks began to move on their own, pounding out a steady rhythm. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. There was only room for one person at each instrument. We'd have to split up. Stay here, I yelled to Yaoyorozu over the din. I'll get the harp. Midoriya, no, it's too dangerous. We don't have a choice. I squeezed her hand once, then turned and ran. The harp was on the far side of the room. My legs felt like lead, each step a monumental effort. But the steady beat of the drum behind me spurred me on. It was working. We had a chance. I was halfway there when a shadow fell over me. I dove forward without thinking, feeling the rush of air as the deity's massive foot crashed down behind me. The impact sent me flying, skidding across the stone floor. No, not that way. I looked up to see a warrior statue looming over me, shield raised high. I dug my heels in, trying to slow my slide, but it wasn't enough. The shield came down hard, and white-hot pain exploded through my leg. I bit back a scream, tasting blood. Every movement was agony, but I couldn't stop. Not when I was so close. I dragged myself forward, inch by excruciating inch. My vision blurred as I reached for the harp. My fingers brushed the strings just as darkness started to close in. A soft, haunting melody filled the air, blending with the drum and other instruments to create a song both beautiful and terrifying. The last thing I saw before consciousness slipped away was the deity statue returning to its seat, that cruel grin still etched on its face. I tried to focus on Yaoyorozu running towards me, but everything was going dim. A detached part of my mind noticed the pool of blood spreading beneath me. Oh, that's why I felt so cold. My leg was. The world faded to black. I drifted in and out of consciousness, caught between searing pain and blessed numbness. Flashes of sensation bombarded me, the cold stone against my cheek, the metallic tang of blood in my mouth, distant voices arguing. My eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus. The cavern swam into view, dimly lit and oppressive. I tried to move and immediately regretted it. White-hot agony shot through my leg, forcing a groan from my lips. Midoriya, don't try to move. Yaoyorozu's face appeared above me, pale and drawn. Her usually immaculate hair was a mess, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. I blinked, trying to clear my head. What? What happened? You saved us, she said softly. The music worked. But your leg. I forced myself to look down. My stomach lurched at the sight. My right leg was gone below the knee. Yaoyorozu had done her best to bandage it, but blood still seeped through. I tried to heal you, she said, her voice cracking. But I couldn't create anything more complex than bandages. My quirk isn't responding properly. I noticed how her hands trembled, the sheen of sweat on her brow. Mana exhaustion. She'd pushed herself too far trying to help me. 1 inch. It's okay, I managed, though the words felt hollow. You did your best. I struggled to sit up, gritting my teeth against the pain. As my vision cleared, I took stock of our situation. 6 of us had survived myself, Yaoyorozu, Sano, Kaido, and 2 others whose names escaped me. Everyone looked shell-shocked, huddled in small groups or sitting alone. I caught snippets of hushed conversations, accusations thrown back and forth. Should never have come here. Sano's fault. He pushed us to. Before I could dwell on it, the ground began to shake. A low rumble filled the air, and the stone floor in the center of the chamber started to rise. We watched in stunned silence as an altar emerged from the ground. It was massive, easily 10 feet tall and twice as wide. The surface was polished obsidian, so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it. Strange symbols were etched into its sides, glowing with an eerie blue light. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. This had to be connected to the final commandment, prove your faith. But how? Midoriya. Sano's voice cut through my thoughts. What do you make of this? I hesitated, aware of all eyes on me. I think it's some kind of test. The final trial. But what does it want from us? Someone asked. I'm not sure, I admitted. But in my studies of ancient cultures, altars like this were often used for sacrifices. A heavy silence fell over the group as the implications sank in. Sacrifices? Kaido, one of the survivors, spat the word out. Haven't we sacrificed enough already? He rounded on Sano, eyes blazing with fury. This is your fault. You pushed us to keep going, to face the boss. And now look where we are. Sano flinched, as if he'd been struck. For a moment, I saw the weight of leadership etched in the lines of his face. Then his expression hardened. You're right, he said quietly. I made the call, and I'll bear the consequences. He straightened, addressing all of us. If a sacrifice is needed, I'll do it myself. No. The word burst from me before I could stop it. We can't just throw a life away like that. There has to be another way. Midoriya, Sano said gently, I appreciate your idealism. But sometimes, a leader has to make hard choices. He turned towards the altar, and my heart sank. This was wrong, all wrong. But what could I do? I watched, my heart in my throat, as Sano approached the altar. His steps were hesitant, each one seeming to cost him dearly. As he reached out to touch the obsidian surface, I wanted to call out, to stop him. But the words died in my throat. The moment Sano's fingers brushed the altar, a red flame burst to life atop it. The sudden light made me squint, casting long shadows across the cavern floor. That's when it hit me. The flame. It was the same vibrant red as the others that had appeared when we first entered this chamber. And there were exactly 6 of them, one for each survivor. My mind raced, connecting dots I hadn't even realized were there. If the red flames represented us, then what about the blue ones? They hadn't activated yet, but their presence couldn't be a coincidence. Wait, I called out, my voice echoing in the chamber. I think I've figured something out. All eyes turned to me as I explained my theory. The red flames, they're us. Our lives, maybe. But those blue ones, I think they're a timer. Sano's brow furrowed. A timer for what? I'm not sure, I admitted. But we need to test it. Can someone else approach the altar? Yaoyorozu stepped forward, her face set in determination. As she touched the obsidian surface, another red flame sprang to life. We watched, tense, as one by one the others did the same. With each touch, my theory solidified. The red flames burned steady, while the blue ones remained dormant. But there was no mistaking their purpose. Now they were waiting for something. So the red flames show how many of us are left, Sano said slowly. And the blue ones. They're counting down to something. I nodded, the weight of this realization settling over me like a lead blanket. Whatever this test is, I don't think it ends until those blue flames go out. A heavy silence fell over the group. We'd solved part of the puzzle, but the implications were terrifying. What would happen when that timer ran out? And more importantly, what were we supposed to do before it did? As if in answer to our unspoken questions, all 6 red flames suddenly blazed brighter. A grinding noise filled the air, and we turned to see the massive stone doors slowly swinging open. For a moment, hope surged through me. Was this it? Had we passed the test? But then I saw the warrior statues. Blue energy crackled along their stone forms, bringing them to life. They advanced towards us with ponderous steps, weapons raised. "Don't look away," I shouted as I noticed one freeze mid-step when I locked eyes with it. "They stop moving if you keep eye contact." We scrambled to position ourselves, each person staring down a statue. It worked for now. But we couldn't keep this up forever. "The door," someone yelled. "It's our only chance." Before anyone could stop him, one of the survivors, a man whose name I'd never learned, made a break for it. We watched, breath held, as he crossed the threshold. For a heartbeat, I dared to hope. Then the doors began to close, and as they did, one of the red flames on the altar winked out. This wasn't just a test of survival. It was a test of sacrifice. I watched in horror as the woman bolted for the door. My throat was raw from shouting, but it didn't matter. She was gone, another red flame extinguished on the altar. "No one else move," I screamed out. "If anyone else leaves, we won't have enough people to look at the statues. We will die." Sano was starting to become more panicked as the warriors got closer and closer. "Midoriya, what is this?" "Like I said before, we just have to stay alive until the blue flames disappear. Those are the timers. When all the blue flames are gone, we win." "Are you sure?" Kaido asked solemnly. "Do you know for certain that once the blue flames are gone, that the door won't just close forever?" I didn't have an answer for that. Kaido turned and gave me a smile. "I never expected someone like you to be so helpful, to be honest. I always found myself looking down on someone weak like yourself. But, because of you, I'm still alive. Thank you, Mr. Kaido." "But I can't. I can't do this," Kaido choked out, starting to cheer up. "My kids, my wife, they need me. I promised I'd come home." Before I could process it, Kaido was on his feet. His eyes were wild, unfocused. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and then he ran. "No," I screamed, lunging forward. Pain exploded through my body, but I didn't care. I had to stop him. We'd all die if he left. My fingers brushed the back of his shirt, but it wasn't enough. I hit the ground hard, watching helplessly as Kaido sprinted through the closing gap in the doors. Another red flame winked out. The massive stone slabs inched closer together, leaving barely enough space for a person to squeeze through. My mind raced, doing the math. 6 of us had survived initially. Now we were down to 3. The statues. There were too many. We couldn't keep them all at bay with just 3 pairs of eyes. The grim reality settled over me like a lead blanket. Someone had to stay behind. I didn't want to die. But as I looked at Yayurazu, pale and trembling from mana exhaustion, and Sano, I knew what I had to do. All my life, I'd dreamed of being a hero, of saving people, even without a quirk. Maybe this was my chance. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "You two need to go," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Yaoyorozu's eyes went wide. What? No, we can't leave you. I managed a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. You have to. I can't walk. And you're too weak to carry me, Yaoyorozu. Sano needs to get you out of here. But, please, I cut her off. Don't make this harder than it already is. I reached into my pocket with trembling fingers, fumbling for a moment before pulling out the small, glowing orb. The E-rank villain core I'd gotten from killing that goblin felt heavier than it should. Yaoyorozu, I said, my voice cracking. I held out the core to her. We were supposed to have dinner, right? Save us a table with this. Her eyes widened, filling with tears. Midoriya, no, I can't. Before I could say anything, Sano moved. In one swift motion, he struck Yaoyorozu at the base of her neck. Her eyes rolled back, and she slumped forward. I'm sorry, Sano said, catching her before she hit the ground. We're running out of time. I wish we could have a proper goodbye. It's better this way, I managed to say. She wouldn't have left otherwise. As Sano heaved Yaoyorozu up and over his shoulder, I found myself speaking again. Take care of her, please. The man sniffed back his own tears. Yeah, I will. And with that, he turned and stumbled towards the narrowing gap between the doors. I watched, holding my breath, as he squeezed through. The massive stone slabs slammed shut with a resounding thud just behind him. I was alone. My heart pounded as I looked around at the warrior statues, their blank stone faces somehow menacing. They'd started moving again now that no one was staring them down. I knew I couldn't keep them all at bay by myself. This was it. The end of the line for Izuku Midoriya. A lump formed in my throat as memories flashed through my mind. All those years of dreaming, of pushing myself to become a hero despite being quirkless. The constant ridicule, the doubt, the pain had it all been for nothing. I thought of my mom, waiting at home. Of Izumi, my little sister who looked up to me. I'd never see them again. Never get to make them proud, to show the world that even someone like me could be a hero. But maybe this counted for something. Yaoyorozu and Sano were safe. They'd make it out, tell our story. My sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. I spotted a sword lying nearby, probably dropped by one of the others in their rush to escape. Gritting my teeth against the pain, I dragged myself towards it. My fingers closed around the hilt, just as the first statue took a lumbering step in my direction. Okay, Izuku, I muttered, hefting the weapon. It felt awkward and heavy in my hands. One last fight. The statues advanced, their stone feet scraping against the floor. I tried to push myself up, to face them standing, but my mangled leg gave out. I toppled sideways, barely catching myself. Come on, I shouted, more to psych myself up than to taunt them. You want me? Then come and get me. The nearest statue raised its weapon, a massive stone axe. I swung wildly with my sword, the blade glancing harmlessly off its leg. The impact jarred my arms, nearly making me drop the weapon. I know I'm weak, I panted, scrambling backward. I know I don't have a quirk, but I've always tried my hardest. Another statue lunged forward. I rolled to the side, crying out as pain lanced through my leg. Its sword struck the ground where I'd been, sending up sparks. Maybe I was never meant to be a real hero, I gasped. But I never stopped trying. I swung again, aiming for the statue's knee. The sword connected, but barely chipped the stone. Before I could pull back, another statue's weapon slammed into my side. The blows sent me tumbling across the floor, the sword clattering away. Stars exploded in my vision as I came to a stop, every inch of me screaming in agony. And then I broke. Shit. This is such fucking bullshit. I slammed my fist against the ground, ignoring the pain that shot through my arm. What was the point of all my training? All those hours spent analyzing heroes. If I couldn't even save myself, I wanted to be stronger. I tried, I really did. But it was never enough. A stone foot crashed down next to my head, and I scrambled backward on instinct. My back hit something solid, the altar. The impact sent a jolt of agony through my battered body, and for a moment, my vision swam. When it cleared, I found myself surrounded. The statues loomed over me, their blank faces somehow more terrifying than any villain I'd ever faced. "You bastards," I started to snarl, but the words died in my throat as one of the statues moved. It happened so fast. One moment, I was staring up at the spear in its hands. The next, that same spear was buried in my stomach. The pain. God, the pain. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before. I opened my mouth to scream, but all that came out was a choked gurgle. As the world started to fade around the edges, my thoughts drifted to Mr. Kaido, the man who'd left us to die. I remembered the tears streaming down his face as he ran. "You were past your limit, huh? Well, join the fucking club. You were making excuses for your own selfishness. That gratitude of yours is as empty as my wallet. Leave it to a genuine piece of trash to use me and throw me away for his own benefit. I have a family too," I screamed in my mind. "I have people depending on me too." Suddenly, I was moving. The statue lifted me into the air, still impaled on its spear. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through me, and I couldn't hold back my cries any longer. They placed me on top of the altar like some kind of sacrificial lamb. Through the haze of pain, I saw another statue step forward. In its hands was a scimitar, tall enough to cut me in half with one swing. As it raised the blade high, a single thought cut through the chaos in my mind. If only I had one more chance. The sword came down. At that same moment, the last blue flame winked out of existence. And then, everything stopped. The world froze. The pain vanished. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. A glowing blue screen hovered in front of me, like something out of a sci-fi movie. It was translucent, with crisp white text that seemed to float in midair. I reached out to touch it, half expecting my hand to pass right through. Instead, my fingers met a smooth, cool surface. "What the hell?" I muttered, my voice echoing in the suddenly silent chamber. The text on the screen changed, and I found myself reading words that made no sense. "Congratulations. You have completed the hidden quest. Courage of the Weak. Would you like to become a player? You have 60 seconds to decide." I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. Player? Quest? Was this some kind of sick joke? Maybe I was hallucinating from blood loss. Yeah, that had to be it. But as the seconds ticked down, a desperate hope bloomed in my chest. If this was real, if I had a chance. "Yes," I shouted, my voice cracking. "Yes, I'll become a player." The screen flickered, and new text appeared. "Welcome, player Izuku Midoriya. Initiating system integration." Before I could process what that meant, I felt a hand on my head. I tried to turn to see who was touching me, but my body wouldn't respond. A warmth spread from the point of contact, racing through my veins like liquid fire. Energy surged through me, making every nerve ending tingle. My vision blurred, replaced by a blinding white light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Comment. Then darkness claimed me, and I knew no more. I jolted awake, my heart pounding like it wanted to escape my chest. Sweat clung to my skin, cold and clammy. My mouth felt like sandpaper. Where am I? What's happening? My eyes darted around, searching for threats, for those terrifying stone statues. But instead of a dark, oppressive chamber, I found myself surrounded by white walls and the steady beep of machines. A hospital? How did I? I tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy, uncooperative. Slowly, I moved my hands under the thin blanket, dreading what I might find. My fingers traced down my leg, expecting to find nothing. But it was there, whole, intact. What? That's impossible. I saw it. I felt it. I stared at the Roman 4 in my arm, the wires connecting me to various monitors. None of this made sense. Memories flooded back the dungeon, the statues coming to life. Yaoyorozu's face twisted in fear, Kaido running away. Was it all just a nightmare? The last rays of sunlight streamed through the window. How long had I been here? My eyes landed on a calendar hanging on the wall, and my stomach dropped. 3 days? I've been out for 3 days. I tried to wrap my head around it, but nothing added up. The dungeon felt so real, every excruciating detail etched into my mind. But here I was, whole and seemingly unharmed. The door to my hospital room swung open abruptly, jolting me from my thoughts. 2 men strode in, their polished shoes clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. The first was tall and lean, with jet black hair and a severe expression. The second had dirty blonde hair cropped close to his head and a 5 o'clock shadow. Both wore crisp suits and official-looking badges pinned to their lapels. Government inspectors. I sat up straighter in the bed as they approached. The blonde man offered me a tired smile that didn't reach his eyes. Izuku Midoriya. His gruff voice made it sound more like a statement than a question. At my nod, he and his partner flashed their GHSC badges briefly. We're with the Hero Safety Commission. Just need to ask you a few questions about the recent dungeon incident. My palms began to sweat. Were they here to arrest me? But no, the inspector had said they only wanted to talk. I tried to keep my breathing steady as the dark-haired man pulled a notebook and pen from his jacket pocket. Let's start with the casualties, he said briskly, pen poised over paper. Who were the other members of your party? I swallowed hard, images of blood and stone flashing through my mind. Sano Itachi was our leader, and Momo Yaoyorozu was our primary spellcaster. I paused, clenching my fists. How are they? Are they? The blonde inspector held up a hand. They'll both recover physically. But Itachi lost his arm. At his age, he'll likely retire from hunting. His expression softened a fraction. The girl's still being treated for trauma. No telling if or when she'll return to the gates. I let out a shaky breath, relief and guilt warring within me. They were alive, at least. But their lives would never be the same. And it was my recklessness that had led us into that death trap. What about the dungeon itself? The dark-haired inspector cut in. Our investigative team found no trace of the statues or altar you described. Any thoughts on that? I stared at him, dumbfounded. How could everything have just vanished? Unless no, it wasn't possible. Was it? From the accounts we've gathered, it seems you may have experienced a rare double awakening inside that gate, the inspector continued. We'd like to test your mana levels, see if they've increased since your last assessment. He pulled a small purple crystal from his pocket and held it over my palm. It glowed softly as he passed a handheld sensor over it. I held my breath, mind racing. Could I really have? The inspector's face fell as he checked the sensor's readout. No change, he muttered. Apologies for the intrusion, Mr. Midoriya. We'll let you focus on your recovery. As the inspectors left, I slumped back against the pillows, exhausted. But before I could close my eyes, something caught my attention. A translucent blue screen hovered in the air, crisp white text floating on its surface. You have unread mail. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes. What the? The screen remained. I reached out, trying to touch it, but my hand passed right through. Okay, Izuku, think, I muttered. If it's not a touchscreen, maybe it responds to voice commands. I cleared my throat. Open. Nothing. Display messages. Still nothing. I racked my brain, remembering how specific the phrasing had to be in some of the RPGs I'd played. Open inbox. The screen flashed, and new text appeared. I leaned forward, reading the messages aloud. The system will help the player's growth. If he fails to obey the system's orders, there may be a penalty. Your rewards have arrived. My mind raced. Was this some kind of quirk manifestation? But I'd been tested multiple times. I was quirkless, no doubt about it. And why would a quirk look like a video game interface? Daily quest? I muttered, noticing the last message. Check quest. Incomplete push-ups 0 note. Incomplete curl-ups 0 note. Incomplete curl-ups 0 down. Incomplete squats 0 to in. Incomplete running 0 10 km. Warning: failure to complete this daily quest will result in a punishment associated with this quest. 100 push-ups. 10 kilometers of running. In my current state, that seemed impossible. But surely the system wouldn't expect me to complete everything right away, right? It's got to have some flexibility, I muttered, trying to convince myself. Maybe it just wants me to start small. Still, the warning about punishment gnawed at me. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was getting late, and exhaustion weighed heavily on me. I'll set an alarm, I decided. Wake up early and give it a shot. For now, I need rest. I fumbled with the bedside clock, setting it for 5 a.m. As I settled back against the pillows, my eyelids grew heavy. Despite my worries, sleep claimed me quickly. The sound of running footsteps jerked me awake. Before I could fully process what was happening, the door burst open. Izuku. Izumi stood in the doorway, chest heaving. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair a mess. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Izu, I started, but she was already across the room, throwing her arms around me. You idiot, she sobbed into my shoulder. I thought. When they call, I thought. I'm okay, Izumi. I'm right here. 1. She pulled back, her hands gripping my arms as if to make sure I was real. What happened? They said something about a dungeon collapse, but no one would tell me details. Are you hurt? How long do you have to stay here? I took a deep breath, carefully considering my words. It was just a routine mission that went sideways. The dungeon. It wasn't stable. We got trapped for a while, but everyone made it out. Izumi's eyes widened. Everyone? I winced internally, remembering Sano's lost arm, Ieyaru's trauma. Well, there were some injuries, but we're alive. God, Izuku. Izumi shook her head. Mom would be freaking out if she knew. A pang of guilt shot through me. How is she? Has there been any change? Izumi's face fell. No, same as always. The doctors say her condition is stable, but... She trailed off, biting her lip. I nodded, understanding the unspoken worry. The cost of keeping Mom in long-term care weighed on both of us. I'm sorry I worried you, I said softly. But I promise, I'm going to keep working hard. We'll figure this out. Izumi's eyes flashed. You shouldn't have to. It's not fair that you're taking all these risks just to. Excuse me. A nurse appeared in the doorway, cutting Izumi off. I'm sorry, but visiting hours are ending. Izumi's shoulders slumped. Already? She turned back to me, reluctance clear on her face. I'll be back first thing tomorrow, okay? I managed a smile. Get some rest, Izumi. I'm not going anywhere. She gave me one last fierce hug before following the nurse out. As the door closed behind her, exhaustion hit me like a wave. I sank back into the pillows, my eyes drifting shut. I woke with the sensation of falling jolting me upright in the hospital bed. But instead of crisp white sheets, my hands grasped only hot sand. Sand that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions, broken only by towering dunes. What? Where am I? I croaked, throat already parched from the arid air. This had to be a dream. Some heat-induced mirage. I staggered to my feet, squinting against the harsh sunlight. The azure sky above was devoid of clouds, the sun directly overhead. Sweat beaded on my skin as I spun in place, struggling to get my bearings. Nothing but shimmering dunes and empty sky for miles. How did I get here? Where even was here? The ground rumbled beneath me, nearly knocking me off balance. I turned just as an enormous shadow fell over the dune. 6 ebony eyes glared down at me, set in a head the size of a bus. The creature's body rippled as it moved, dozens of armored segments propelling it up the slope. Twin fangs as long as my forearm glistened with viscous venom. Poison-fanged giant sand centipede. The classification sprang to mind reflexively, some long-ingrained hunter's instinct taking over. I scrambled back as the centipede loomed closer, mandibles clacking menacingly. This thing could swallow me whole in one bite. A flashing blue box appeared before me, confirming my impossible situation. Penalty quest: survive. Goal: survive for 4 hours. Time remaining: 3:59:57. 4 hours. Out here, alone and unarmed, I'd be lucky to last 4 minutes. But the timer was already counting down, seconds slipping away. I had no choice but to run. So I ran for my life, sand flying with every frantic step. The centipede was never more than a few body lengths behind, massive jaws snapping at my heels. My lungs burned with each ragged breath as I struggled up the shifting dune face. The desert sun beat down mercilessly, baking my skin and parching my throat. I scrambled over the dune's crest, using the temporary cover to dart left and change direction. The centipede plowed straight ahead before realizing its prey had slipped away. It let loose an ear-splitting screech of frustration. The brief respite allowed me to scan the landscape, searching for any advantage. In the distance, I spotted a narrow ravine cutting between 2 dunes. If I could reach it, maybe I could lose the centipede in the tight confines. I pushed my aching muscles to their limit, sprinting for the ravine. The centipede recovered and raced after me, mandibles clacking with predatory excitement. I didn't dare look back. My world narrowed to the ravine ahead, my goal tantalizingly close. Just a few more meters. I dove headfirst into the ravine, rolling to soften the impact. A split second later, the centipede slammed into the narrow entrance, unable to squeeze through. It thrashed violently, trying to force its bulk into the tight space. Sand cascaded down as the dune face began collapsing from the vibrations. I scrambled deeper into the ravine, the walls providing blessed shade. My chest heaved as I gulped down air. But I couldn't rest yet. The ravine was still vulnerable to cave-ins. I had to keep moving. On and on, I stumbled through the winding ravine, the centipede's enraged cries echoing behind me. Doubt and despair crept in as the minutes dragged by. How much longer could I keep this up? What if the ravine dead-ended? I was running on fumes, with no food or water in this hellish wasteland. Just when I thought my legs would give out, a flash of blue appeared, overlaying my vision. Penalty quest complete. Returning to reality in 3, 2, 1. The desert dissolved abruptly, replaced by the familiar confines of my hospital room. I collapsed to the floor, covered in sand and soaked in sweat. For a few dizzying moments, I wasn't sure what was real. Then it all came rushing back. The penalty quest. The giant centipede. By some miracle, I'd survived the full 4 hours. I dragged myself back into the hospital bed, muscles screaming in protest. A new message hovered before me. Penalty quest survived. Good job, player. I stared at the completion announcement, unsure whether to feel proud or afraid. The system's power went far beyond anything I could have imagined. It had transported me to a hyper-realistic desert and pitted me against a monster I had no chance of defeating alone. If that was just a penalty quest, I shuddered to think what the real challenges might entail. One thing was clear: I could no longer ignore or underestimate this strange new ability. Exhaustion seeped into my bones, but my mind raced with questions. How had I gained this power? Were there others like me? And what did the system want from me in return? I needed to experiment, to test the limits of what I could do. And I had to get stronger. Much stronger. The penalty quest had proven I wouldn't survive long relying on wits alone. But could I really trust this system? Its motivations were still a mystery to me. And if anyone else discovered my new power, would they try to exploit it? No, for now it was safest to keep it secret. I stifled a yawn, my eyelids growing heavy. My body begged for rest, but anxiety gnawed at me. I was in deep waters now, and I had a feeling the currents ahead would only get more treacherous. But as I finally drifted off, one thought broke through the doubt and fear. Comment. Whatever came next, I would be ready. I woke up with my body stiff and sore from yesterday's ordeal. The desert sun still seemed to beat down on me, even in the cool hospital room. As I sat up, a nurse entered to check my vitals. "How are you feeling this morning, Midoriya?" she asked briskly. "Better, I think. Just really sore." I hesitated, then said, "Would it be possible for me to do some light exercise today? I know the doctor said to take it easy, but I think some movement might help." The nurse pursed her lips. "Let me check with Dr. Hayashi. I'll be back shortly." While she was gone, I closed my eyes and mentally called up the blue screen interface from the mysterious system. As expected, a new daily quest awaited me. Daily quest. Path to the strongest. Incomplete push-ups 0 none. Incomplete sit-ups 0 none. Incomplete curl-ups 0 none. Incomplete squats 0 none. Incomplete running 10 km. Just reading the requirements made my muscles ache. This was easily 10 times my normal workout routine. But the penalty for failure had been made abundantly clear yesterday. I had no choice but to complete the quest. The nurse returned with news that the doctor approved light exercise, cautioning me to stop if anything felt off. I thanked her and changed into some workout clothes. I began with push-ups, dropping to the floor beside my bed. The first few weren't too bad, but by 20, my arms were shaking. At 50, they felt like jelly. I collapsed at 73, gasping for air. "Come on, Izuku," I muttered. "You can do this." I forced myself through the last 27, each one a battle of will. When I finished, I lay on the cool tile floor, my chest heaving. Sit-ups and curl-ups were next. My core burned as I worked through them, sweat soaking my hospital gown. Every rep was a struggle, but I refused to give up. The squats nearly broke me. My legs, still weak from yesterday's desert run, screamed in protest. I gritted my teeth and pushed through, using the bed for support when I stumbled. Finally, only the run remained. I changed into the clothes Izumi had brought me and made my way to the hospital courtyard. A small track circled a garden, meant for physical therapy patients. I started running, my legs protesting with each step. The first kilometer was torture. By the third, I was ready to quit. But I thought of Mom, of Izumi, of all the people counting on me. I couldn't let them down. I lost track of time as I ran, focused only on putting one foot in front of the other. When I finally completed the 10th kilometer, I collapsed onto a bench, utterly spent. The blue screen flashed. Daily quest complete. Rewards processing. The screen changed to show 3 stat points. Auto recovery. Upon acceptance, your body rapidly heals and eliminates any workout-related aches and pains. 1x random box. Accept rewards? Yes, no. I focused my mind on accepting the rewards, not wanting to speak out loud. A wave of relief instantly washed over me as the soreness disappeared from my muscles. I felt refreshed, as if I hadn't just pushed my body to the limit. Suddenly, a small wooden box materialized in front of me and fell into my lap. I jerked back in surprise. The box popped open on its own, emitting a soft white glow. When the light faded, a red vial lay inside. I picked it up cautiously. The vial was ornately decorated and filled with a shimmering liquid. A description appeared. Item: Status Recovery Potion. Item class: None. Type: Potion. A potion that will instantly heal the player's HP and MP to maximum health. I stared at the vial in awe. This tiny thing could heal all my injuries and restore my energy. It was incredibly valuable, especially for someone hoping to be a hero. If only I'd had this potion instead of just the auto recovery. Nah, no way. I needed to keep the potion safe. Did this strange system give me some kind of inventory? I focused my thoughts on storing the vial away. Sure enough, it vanished from my hands. In its place, rows of blue boxes appeared in my mind's eye, one now containing the potion, another holding what looks to be the sword I was holding against those things. I willed the potion back to my hand to test it, and it reappeared instantly. This could definitely come in handy. I was still processing everything when a familiar voice called out, "Deku." I looked up to see Kaken striding towards me, usual scowl on his face. Just my luck to run into him here. I quickly put the potion back in my inventory before he could see. "Kaken," I said evenly. "What are you doing here?" He jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "Dropping off my old hag's medication." I nodded. Made sense he'd be here for his grandmother. Kaken eyed me suspiciously. "The hell are you doing anyway, Deku? You're not a patient here." I shrugged, trying to seem casual. "I was visiting someone and decided to take a walk in the courtyard." He narrowed his eyes, clearly not buying it. Kaken could always tell when I was hiding something. "And this isn't the hospital my mom was admitted to." "You're up to something," he accused. "Spill it, Deku." Crap. I needed to distract him, fast. "Oh, by the way, Kaken, have you heard anything about Rukyu Agency's a rank gate clearing?" I asked innocently. "I heard they cleared the gate in record time." 1. Kaken's attention immediately shifted. His competitiveness sparked. "Gee, those extras are lucky. I don't have a hero agency yet," he scoffed. "I'll beat that in record time." He launched into a rant about how much better he would have performed on the mission. I nodded along, letting Kaken boast. Crisis averted, for now. I watched Kaken stride away, grumbling about beating the pros' record time. Typical of him to turn it into a competition. I turned my thoughts back to the mysterious system I was now connected to. So far I had daily quests, an inventory, stat points, and some kind of status screen. I wondered what else I could access. Only one way to find out. I focused my mind and thought, status. A blue screen appeared before me. Midoriya Izuku. Level: 1 title, none. Job: none fatigue, 0. HP: 1000 MP 100. Available stat points, 3. Attributes: vertical bar strength, vertical bar 10, vertical bar. Vertical bar vitality, vertical bar 10, vertical bar. Vertical bar agility, vertical bar 10, vertical bar. Vertical bar intelligence, vertical bar 10, vertical bar. Vertical bar sense, vertical bar 10, vertical bar. Skills: sprint LV 1. Increases movement speed by 15%. Costs 15 MPM. So this laid out all my core stats and abilities. Strength, vitality, agility, intelligence, sensitivity. It was like an RPG character sheet. What did it all mean? My intelligence was only 10, far lower than it should be. I'd always been top of my class when it came to book smarts. But this system had reset me to a clean slate. I'd have to build my mental stats back up. 1. An idea struck me. I focused on the vitality stat and added 1 point. Sure enough, my max HP increased to 1100, so gaining vitality directly increased my health, which meant each point of magic would probably raise my max MP as well. I needed to test that theory. I got into push-up position on the ground, then did a single rep. My arms burned with the effort. I added 2 points to my strength stat. When I tried another push-up, it was noticeably easier. My strength had increased for sure. This system allowed me to improve my physical abilities far beyond normal human limitations. The possibilities were staggering. I sat back on the bench. This mysterious power could be the key to achieving my dream of becoming a hero. If I used it wisely and kept it secret, I could gain the strength to stand beside other top heroes. Maybe I could even surpass All Might himself. But I couldn't get cocky. My stats were still pathetic compared to pro heroes or high-ranked villains, and I didn't fully understand this system yet. What other surprises might it have in store? How was it choosing my daily quests? For now, I'd keep experimenting and training both my body and mind. This was the chance I'd been waiting for. I wouldn't waste this opportunity. Time to push myself harder than ever before. I collapsed onto the bench in the hospital courtyard, my lungs burning as I gulped down air. 10 kilometers complete. The satisfaction of finishing today's grueling daily quest washed over me, easing the aches in my muscles. As I caught my breath, the now familiar blue screens popped up before my eyes. The first displayed the rewards for completing the quest, more stat points to distribute, recovery options, and a random item box. I quickly chose to recover, sighing in relief as the soreness melted away. The next screen showed my current stats. Midoriya Izuku. Level: 1. Title: None. Job: None. Fatigue: 0. HP: 1200 MP, 120. Available stat points: 3. Attributes: Vertical bar strength, vertical bar 15, vertical bar vitality, vertical bar 12, vertical bar agility, vertical bar 14, vertical bar intelligence, vertical bar 12, vertical bar sense, vertical bar 12, vertical bar skills. Sprint LV 1. Increases movement speed by 15%. Costs 15 MPM. My core abilities had improved substantially over the past few days. I was still far below pro hero level, but the progress was encouraging. The random box materialized in my hands, a plain wooden cube about the size of a jewelry box. I wondered what useless trinket it would produce this time. The past few had been a cheap pen, a coat button, and a 100 yen coin. Hardly rewarding for the grueling quests I completed. I cracked open the lid, bracing for another letdown. But this time, instead of a flash of light, an intricate metal key materialized and dropped into my palm. I turned it over, admiring the intricate scrollwork along the shaft. A description appeared. Item: Dungeon key. Item class E. Type: Key. A key that allows you to create an instance dungeon. You may use this at the third entrance of Shibuya Station. My eyes widened. This was no trinket, it was an actual dungeon key. With this, I could access an instant dungeon anytime, instead of having to wait for gates to open randomly. It was an incredible opportunity to gain battle experience and items. But how did it work? The description mentioned a specific place, the third entrance of Shibuya Station. That must be where the instant dungeons were generated. I'd need to experiment with the key and see. I quickly stashed the key in my inventory before anyone else could see it. This was not something I wanted to explain if hospital staff started asking questions. Now, how to convince the staff to let me go out tonight? I approached Shibuya Station, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar buzz of the city surrounded me, but it felt different tonight. Commuters rushed past, oblivious to the adventure I was about to embark on. My fingers traced the outline of the dungeon key in my pocket, its weight a constant reminder of what I was about to do. Salarymen in crisp suits hurried home, their briefcases swinging at their sides. Teenagers laughed and chattered, gathered in small groups near vending machines. The smell of yakitori wafted from a nearby stand, making my stomach growl. I scanned the crowd, searching for any sign of other heroes. A flash of a costume caught my eye. Mount Lady, signing autographs near the ticket gates. Death Arms stood nearby, his arms crossed as he kept watch. I ducked my head, not wanting to draw attention. As I neared the third entrance, my steps slowed. Sweat beaded on my palms, and I wiped them on my pants. Was I really ready for this? The memory of my last dungeon flashed through my mind, the terror, the pain, the feeling of utter helplessness. Come on, Izuku, I muttered to myself. You've trained for this. You're stronger now. You can do this. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out the key and approached the entrance. The metal felt cool against my skin as I inserted it into an invisible lock. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a surge of energy crackled around me, making my hair stand on end. The world shifted. The cacophony of the station vanished, replaced by an eerie silence. The air grew heavy, pressing against my eardrums. I blinked, trying to adjust to the sudden change. When my vision cleared, I found myself standing in a twisted version of the subway. Gone were the bright lights and polished surfaces. Instead, decay had set in. Rust crept along the rails, and mold bloomed on the walls. The air was thick with the musty smell of abandonment. Panic gripped me as I spun around, searching for the exit. But where the gate had been, there was only a solid wall. I pounded my fists against it, shouting for help. My voice echoed through the empty tunnels, unanswered. A blue screen materialized before me. Warning: you cannot exit this dungeon. Either kill the boss or use a hearthstone. My blood ran cold. Kill the boss? I whispered, my voice shaking. I don't even have a hearthstone. What have I gotten myself into? I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. This was nothing like the E-rank dungeons I'd faced before. Those had been challenging, sure, but I'd always had an exit strategy. Now, I was trapped in an unknown environment with no backup and no way out. Think, Izuku, I muttered, rapping my knuckles against my forehead. What would All Might do in this situation? I pushed off the wall and started walking, my footsteps echoing ominously through the abandoned subway. Each step kicked up small clouds of dust, and I could taste the stale air on my tongue. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, making me jump at every little movement. Up ahead, the tracks curved out of sight. I paused, peering into the darkness. Was that movement I saw, or just my imagination playing tricks on me? I thought I heard a faint scrape of claws against concrete, but when I strained my ears, there was nothing but silence, just my nerves getting the best of me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Can't let fear cloud my judgment. Stay focused. Analyze the situation. I still hadn't seen any signs indicating what type of enemies lurked in this dungeon. But the oppressive atmosphere felt dangerous, primal. Like something ancient and feral had claimed this place. Up ahead, a faint light spilled from a side passage. I approached cautiously, pressing myself against the grimy wall. Holding my breath, I risked a quick glance around the corner. My heart stuttered. At the end of the passage stood a hulking creature, its back to me. My first panicked thought was that it was a bear. Its shoulders were that massive, its dark fur shaggy and unkempt. But as it shifted, I caught a glimpse of metallic plates running down its spine. Not a bear, some kind of monster. Steel-fanged Raken. The words hovered above the wolf's head like some weird video game HUD. I blinked hard, but they didn't disappear. It's got a name. I'd seen plenty of villains before, well, as many as an E rank nobody could see. Giants, goblins, even the occasional slime. but they were always just categories, not individuals. This was different. This wolf wasn't just some mutation. It looked perfect. Terrifying, sure, with those metal fangs gleaming in the dim subway light. But perfect. My mind raced. Was this even a real villain? Or was the system cooking up custom monsters just for me? The red text of its name nagged at me. There had to be a reason for that color, right? I shook my head. Who cared what color its name was if I couldn't figure out how to kill it? The wolf's hackles rose, a low growl rumbling from its throat. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. They might as well have been made of concrete. I can't move? The words came out as a pathetic whisper. The wolf lunged. Suddenly, my body remembered how to work. I stumbled to the side, feeling the rush of air as those metal jaws snapped shut inches from my face. The clang of steel on steel echoed through the abandoned station. I backpedaled, tripping over my own feet. The wolf was relentless, not giving me a second to catch my breath. It lunged again, and this time I felt its hot breath on my cheek as I barely dodged. Pure adrenaline took over. I slammed my palms against the wolf's flank and pushed off, sending myself flying backward. My body moved in ways I didn't know it could, flipping, twisting, landing in a one-handed handstand. For a split second, I felt like a pro gymnast. Then reality and gravity caught up. I toppled over, momentum carrying me into an ungraceful roll that ended with my feet slamming into a rusted storefront gate. "Oh," I muttered, then froze. The wolf was eyeing me, probably deciding which part to bite first. But something felt different. I planted my hands on the grimy subway floor, muscles tensing. My body feels light. I pushed off, launching myself into the air. The wolf's eyes widened. Do wolves' eyes normally widen in surprise? As I sailed over its head, landing in a crouch beside it. Power surged through me, unlike anything I'd ever felt before. All those times I'd imagined what it would be like to have a quirk this blew those daydreams out of the water. I just got my life back, I screamed, more to psych myself up than anything. I'm not losing it here. My fist connected with the wolf's jaw. I'd like to say I saw it happen in slow motion, but honestly, it was too fast for me to track. 1 second I was winding up. The next the wolf was flying through the air, crashing into a long abandoned ramen shop. I stared at my hand in disbelief. Had I really just done that? The wolf extracted itself from the debris, shaking off dust and bits of drywall. It didn't look happy. I charged forward, not wanting to give it time to recover. My fist connected in an uppercut that would have made All Might proud. But this time, the wolf was ready. It twisted, snapping at my arm. I barely managed to bring my other hand down on top of its head, redirecting those metal fangs away from my flesh. The initial rush faded, replaced by cold realization. I was stronger, sure, but punching a metal-plated wolf to death. Not exactly a winning strategy. "Think, Izuku," I muttered. "No backup, no healers, but—" My eyes widened as I remembered. The inventory. I thrust my hand forward, shouting, "Inventory!" A glowing screen materialized, and I plunged my arm in. My fingers closed around cool leather, and I knew I'd found what I needed. I yanked the sword free, Kenji's sword, the one he'd used in that nightmarish double dungeon. The one he'd abandoned along with the rest of us. The wolf lunged one final time. I swung the blade in a wide arc, feeling a sickening resistance as it cleaved through fur, flesh, and bone. The two halves of the wolf collapsed behind me, blood pooling on the cracked tile floor. "You have defeated Steel Fang Raken. You have leveled up." I stared at the floating text, then at the sword in my trembling hand. I remembered Kenji bragging about how much he'd spent on it, 460,000 yen. More money than I'd ever spent on a weapon. A chorus of growls echoed from the darkened tunnels around me. "Great. Where there's one wolf, there's a pack. Well, I said, gripping the sword tighter, guess I'll be hanging on to this for a while. I retreated to a relatively defensible spot, a broken down ticket booth near one of the platform pillars. My back to the wall, I finally had a moment to catch my breath and take stock of the situation. Status, I whispered, hoping the system would respond. Sure enough, a translucent screen appeared before me. Midoriya Izuku. Level 2. Job, none. Title, none. HP, 1300 MP, 130. STR, 16. VIT, 13. AUGI, 15. INT, 13. SEN, 13. Available stat points, 0. I blinked at the status screen and something clicked. Wait a second. I muttered, comparing the numbers to what I remembered from before. Each stat had gone up by 1 point since leveling up. It wasn't just the bonus points I'd allocated earlier. The growth is exponential? I wondered aloud, flexing my fingers. My strength and agility felt way higher than they had been just a few days ago. A grin spread across my face as I stood up, brushing dust off my pants. The fear that had been gnawing at my gut started to fade, replaced by a surge of excitement. This was my chance to prove myself, to become the hero I'd always dreamed of being. A dozen pairs of glowing red eyes appeared in the shadows around me. More of those steel-fanged wolves, no doubt. But instead of panic, I felt a strange calm settle over me. You don't scare me, I said, gripping the sword tighter. After all, I've already died once before. The words came out bolder than I felt, but they weren't a lie. I'd faced death in that stone statue room, felt its cold grip. What were a few oversized dogs compared to that? One of the wolves growled, low and menacing. I raised the sword, its weight unfamiliar, but somehow right in my hand. All right then, I muttered. Let's see what this new strength can do.